Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. It is Tuesday, May 9th, and I'm joined here in our media room by our Deputy County Executive, Ken Jenkins, and also by the head of CSEA, local here in Westchester County, Hattie Adams. Both Ken and Hattie are going to be speaking on our topic today, which involves the successful completion of negotiations between Westchester County and the CSEA chapter, which Hattie will identify. We have people in the audience from both of those sides of the negotiating table that are here, and I'm going to defer to Hattie to introduce her colleagues from CSEA. I want to take the opportunity to introduce some important individuals here. From our executive administration, we're joined by our Director of Finance, Karen Hablow. We have with us finance directors don't always get a round of applause. Neither do budget directors, Larry Sewell. And we expect to be joined by our Deputy Director of Operations, Emily Saltzman. Our Director of Operations, Joe McDonald, is out of town right now, and we await her return to deal with some of the issues that have come up during her absence. We're joined by members of the Westchester County Board of Legislators. We have with us here Nancy Barr, Ben Boykin, Erica Pierce, Nadat Gashi, David Imamura. We expect to be joined in a few minutes by David Tubiolo, and I'll be sure to introduce any of the other legislators who come. Debbie Friedman, who works alongside Legislator Barr, is with us here as well. If I haven't introduced anybody, let me know. I'm happy to do it. This is an important day, both structurally and symbolically. We have closed our negotiations with CSEA, which is the largest union by far of Westchester County employees. We've estimated in round numbers that 2/3 of all of the people that are unionized workers within Westchester County are members of CSEA. They are one of 9 bargaining units that Westchester County has responsibility to work in the workforce with, and then we have a number of other individuals who are non-represented management. And with this agreement that we have that has been ratified by the union and been approved by the Board of Legislators, we now have an agreement that will go into effect, I believe, for the next 5 years through the end of 2027. You may recall the history, or you may not recall the history, where the relationship between the executive branch and the union was not always so collegial. When we walked into office in the beginning of 2018, there was no contract in place for 7 years for CSEA. We also had an overdue contract for the New York State Nurses Association representatives with us here, and we had recently negotiated contracts for some other unions, but insufficient funding in the 2018 budget, which was passed at the end and presented at the end of 2017 to satisfy that. So we had to work it out for us as a management team. We dealt with CSEA during that period of time, the other bargaining units, and we have tried as best as we can to change the climate of the dialogue and the climate of the relationship. There were certain interests that are part of the individual workforce and as represented by their union, and there are certain interests that management has. This is true in every form of endeavor. I've worked in the corporate life before I came into public life. Those different priorities, those different needs are not mutually exclusive. And if you are willing to operate from a position of mutual respect and understanding and appreciation for, in our case, what the workforce does, and if we can express in an intelligent, fair manner what the pressures are on the management side of the equation, we can get to closure. It isn't easy to do. It isn't a matter of one side winning and one side losing. There are concessions that have to be made on both sides of the table, but they have to come from respect. And if there's anything that I've learned during these 5 years in this particular position, is how impossible it is to do the job for the people of Westchester that this county needs to do without a workforce that feels properly well treated, properly motivated, and properly compensated. And we have people that do all different kinds of work in this government, and I've often said, and I'll say it again at this moment in time, work that I personally am not capable of doing. If you work inside a sewer treatment plant, if you work in the Department of Mental Health, in other unions, if you work in the correctional institution, if you work as a member of our county police department, Department of Public Safety, if you work in departments that involves parks and recreations, that involves the Department of Health, you have different diverse duties. But you never know when the talent of that individual comes to fore. When you see a pandemic hit you, all of a sudden you realize how badly you need nurses to be able to be there for you. When you deal with issues of flooding in a moment's notice, the people that respond in Department of Public Works Transportation have to be able to perform professionally to do the things they have to do to help us deal with it, and those in emergency services. And those of us who sit at the top of the pyramid, in my case, you run for elective office, so does the Board of Legislators, we take far too much credit for the end result that happens. The bulk of the credit belongs to those individuals who do the work day after day. And I might add, this is an anecdote I've told often. I had a good friend of mine, high school colleague of mine, who was working in the county government, he's long since retired, during the days when I was in the County Board of Legislators 30 years ago. And he reminded me, even though I had the high title, I'd become chairman of the Board of Legislators at that point in time in my career, he said, just remember, George, we're the weebies. Weebies, what's that mean? He says, we be here before you got here. We be here after you're gone. And it turned out he was right, because when I left the Board of Legislators to go to Albany as a state assemblyman, he called me up, one word, weebie. But in that reality should be something that comforts the people of Westchester County, that the people who work for this county, in the main, in the vast majority of them, are committed to their jobs. They're not doing it for a political leader. They're not doing it for a county executive. They're doing it because of what they do for a living, their own commitment to their own professionalism, and because they recognize that the work that they do is essential to the people of Westchester County. Now, everyone knows that you always have a range of ability and a range of attitude in every situation. And no entity has complete perfection in all of the people that we deal with. And for the individual who comes up to me in the community and says, I called such and such a department and I got a rude person on the telephone. These things happen, and we try to work through it. The management within the union works through it, as well as the management of the operating departments. But we are proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and the things that we've accomplished could not have been done without the workforce being well motivated and compensated, and without the cooperation of those in the union movement, in this particular case, CSEA. When we saw the city of New York make a mandate and said that every one of their employees had to be vaccinated for COVID, we called up CSEA leadership, and we asked them in a phone call. I had the executive team around the table. Larry's at the table there as well. And we said, what do you think? Now, that in and of itself is an interesting dynamic, that the management of the county, including the county executive, duly elected, top member of the pyramid, would consult union representatives to see how they thought something should happen. And out of that dialogue came a strategy that was different from the strategy in New York City, and I'm proud to say our strategy worked better. We had more people protected from COVID, less COVID infection in our workforce. And I attribute that to the fact that we could work cooperatively on an issue that mattered in that fashion, that we could get advice, and we would listen to the advice, as we try to do with other members of our executive team. Karen Hablow comes here with a world of experience in finance. Larry Sewell comes here with a world of experience in budget directors. Ultimately, it's my responsibility as county executive to make a particular decision. But to override that decision, to micromanage at the executive level or working with the workforce level, is foolish. The mission here is to provide the best possible government for the period of time that we have this responsibility for the people of Westchester. And then at the appropriate time, to turn those car keys over to the next group of leaders. And that is what intelligent public management is about, in my opinion. And that's why when we have a partner, as we do, with CSEA, we try to make it work. We try to make it work for them. We try to make it work for the goals that we have. And at the end of the day, we hope that it works for the residents of Westchester County. I'd like Ken Jenkins to talk a little bit about the arrangements that we've made. Certainly, any of these contracts are in much greater detail and mind-numbing detail. It matters a lot to the members, but it's important for you to get at least just an overview of a few things. So I ask Ken, our Deputy County Executive, to provide that overview. Ken.
And thanks, George. And certainly it's been a privilege for all of us on the executive team with county executive to work with all the professionals and all of the outstanding members, President Hattie Adams, her negotiation teams. And right from the very beginning in 2018, the county executive pointed out that there was a 7-year open contract, and from day one, well, there was a message that was being sent across the board that things were going to be different in working with every member of labor, every member that works for the county of Westchester, and have that same level of respect to be able to do all the things that are possible. Starting with like snow days, which was the 3rd day we were in office, we had a blizzard and had to shut down the county, and that had not happened previously. It was not something that was done, and that's the kind of leadership that we have done and cooperated in working with all of our friends and family members that are part of the labor movement. Everybody wants to hear the bottom line. The biggest bottom line was that there's a 15% increase over the 5 years of the contract. So from going back to 2023, to January 1, 2023, their salary is going to be increased by 2.75%. In January 24, again 2.75%, 25, 2.75%, and then 26 to 3%, and then 27, 3%. So over the period of time, it's 15% round numbers, and that is an excellent negotiation by the members of the team. And as county executive pointed out, it is give and take. There are several mind-numbing details, but the highlights of them were to make sure that people maintain the benefits that were essential to them, to make sure that the contributions that they paid for prescription drug care was consistent across the board. And again, CSEA was in a position that during the pandemic, while there were certain contracts that were out, CSEA's contract was expiring, and they decided to do a rollover contract, which gave another 1 year for us to be able to balance things out, to see how things were going to be modified, the things that were going to impact from the pandemic, what kind of impact would we have going forward. Again, there's longevity bonuses, and that's for when people have been here. As George said, we be here for a long time, right? But public servants need to have the level of respect, and the contract reflects that level of respect to each and every member in CSEA's case today, but for all of the members in our organized labor force to be able to make sure to do the best job they can do for the people of Westchester County. And CSEA has been a leader in that. We see that thread no matter which departments there are. The county executive talked about the 9 bargaining units, but in each one of those 9 bargaining units, there's still CSEA members in each one of those locations, whether that's corrections, whether that's PBA, et cetera. So we really have a lot of confidence in the work that was done by the negotiation team led by Hattie Adams as the president, and with all of their great workers as far as Larry Sperber for the attorneys, and certainly for our, Vince Toomey for our side, with our great professionals, Larry Soule and Karen Hablow, working through this particular thing. So again, congratulations on having the work done. The County Board of Legislators are looking at it and approving it and moving forward. And again, there'll be the fun, mind-numbing detail that everyone would like to see in each and every corner, because there was something in it for everyone that was necessary. The fight that this leadership team, this negotiation team did to make sure that everyone felt listened to, heard, and respected is reflected in this contract. Again, congratulations.
Let me recognize that we've been joined by County Legislator Tyree Woodson Samuels. The aforementioned Emily Saltzman is now with us, so we're happy to have her here as well. And who am I missing?
Tubiello is right there.
Oh, David Tubiello is with us as well, sitting out in the hallway. County Legislator David Tubiello, welcome. The process that happens through this process is through the Taylor Law, a New York state law. It is the responsibility of the executive branch of a government to conduct and come to closure on the negotiations. CSEA has a negotiating team. We have a designated individual who does our union negotiations on our behalf as a management team. We have discussions with our negotiator. They're at the table and they hammer things out, and it's never a straight path. There's always a back and a forth and a proposal and a counter proposal. When those proposals have reached a certain point, we generally will have the executive team meet with the executive negotiating team for the union and have a handshake conceptual agreement. We're on the same page. Then everything has to be written up. There's a great degree of detail to these things, and each side scrutinizes to make sure that the things that we have conceptually agreed to is actually what's in the document in front of us. And we catch things at times like that. It's important to make sure we do that extra step of diligence. At that point in time, the union then goes through its process of informing its members of the proposed contract and ultimately a ratification vote. I'll let Hattie talk about that process in a second. Once the union has ratified it, then in that fashion, we then submit it to the Board of Legislators, in whatever level of government, the executive branch submits it to the legislature. The Taylor Law does not allow a legislature to modify the arrangements. They can accept it or they can reject it, but they do have the right to scrutinize it. They have the right to ask questions, and if there's insufficient comfort with the deal that's negotiated, they can reject it, which would send us back to the bargaining table. Again, during my tenure in the county legislature, we had a couple of those arrangements with other unions that became very problematic. But here we are today, having gone through that process. The Board of Legislators unanimously, which means bipartisanly, has approved the contract that is before us today. And I must say that I've had the pleasure of working with lots of individuals in this union over a long period of time, going back to when I was a legislator, knowing Jack McPhillips, certainly dealing with Carmine DiBattista, in more recent years, Karen Pecora. But it is a great joy to work with Hattie Adams, and she's a tough cookie. She doesn't. You can like somebody and they can still give you a hard time, which is exactly what our members want. So let me now invite Hattie Adams, who's the head of the union, to take the time to introduce the people she'd like to introduce and then talk a little bit from the union perspective before we actually sign the deal. Hattie.
Thank you. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Today we have with us, I'll start from the top, Larry Sparber, who is our lead negotiator and LRS for CSEA. We have Alyssa Cagle, which she's not with us today, but she's a labor relations specialist. Our negotiation team is John and Felice, Zabida Jackson, George Vargas, Barry Nemhart, Brian McMillan, John Raymer, Armida Shamar, Nick D. Giumondo, Eliza, and that's our negotiation team. We also have in the audience with us our union representative, Eliza Scuderi, and our treasurer for CSEA, Steve Sandoval. So we would like to say thank you to God, who brings joy to my life every day. And I would like to thank County Executive Latimer and Deputy County Executive Jenkins. And I would like to thank our negotiation team. I would like to thank our union reps, our executive board, and the finance. We appreciate you guys, and the budget committee. And I would just like to thank everyone, but mainly I would like to thank our members. And our members play such an important role to CSEA. We don't do this by ourselves. We need each and every member. One of the things that I just kept going over in my head before this press conference is it took 7 years. My calculation was 8 years, but I'm gonna use 7 years. It took 7 years, and it was a hard time. I wasn't the leadership at the time, but I supported the leadership at the time. And that administration, which was the Astorino administration, did not care about CSEA or even the workforce. And what we're doing today, and with this leadership, County Exec Latimer, he brought hope back to the county. He brought hope back to the workforce in general with his and also his team. And we really appreciate that. When he addresses us in any email, he says, "Dear colleagues." That means so much. We have gotten a lot of responses behind that. Uncle George, some call you. And they say he's just respectful. He's someone you can walk to on the street. He could be getting in his car, and he will stop and speak to us all. So we as workers, CSEA members, we appreciate that. We are CSEA, and we make Westchester County work. So I want to thank everyone again, and we appreciate each and everything. The negotiations were kind of tough, but we got the job done, and that's from communications and just a partnership. So in CSEA, there's a community, which there's unity, and thank you to our members for bringing this together and letting this happen, making this happen for all of us. Thank you.
So just a few closing thoughts before I sign the document. We have a piece of legislation from the Board of Legislators that approves the contract, which then, upon my signature, puts it into force on our behalf. I think it's important to understand the humorous line that I said before about Weebies, notwithstanding the humor in it. None of us are here forever. We understand that metaphysically, and we understand that in practical terms. And not just because we have, in my case, terms and term limits and all that stuff, but practical reality. This county has a size, a sweep, and a scope that extends beyond our personal times doing these things that we do. And I think we have to understand that our obligation is not only to the people who are here in Westchester County today, but for the people who will be in Westchester County in the years to come, that we maintain this county, the assets of this county, the willingness of all of us to work through our differences, because there are differences. We have ideological differences. We have differences on points of fact, but to work through those things to prove that we can work together in the final analysis and that democracy can, in fact, work. There is a tradition in Massachusetts that occurs when a governor leaves office and a new governor is sworn in. And it's a ceremony, if you may know the geography, the state capitol is in Boston, and it fronts out onto the Boston Common. And the outgoing governor gives a farewell address. And before the new governor is sworn in to give an inaugural address, the outgoing governor then walks down the steps of the Capitol and walks out into the Boston Common. And if you're familiar with Boston, it's a wide open, grassy area. There are people milling about watching the ceremony, so that that person who held all the authority of the governorship of a state, commonwealth as they call it, now becomes a citizen once again. We're all citizens. We're all equal in God's sight. And we have to figure out how to use the power that we're given while we have it for the best possible result. And that is certainly in these matters, internal matters, it's also in external matters. And so I view this as one more of those examples where we're trying to just do the right thing as best as we know how, and to do it as quickly as we can and as effectively as we can. And if we set that marker down, then whatever follows us will have a guideline to move forward on. And we could look at a Westchester County in 20 years and 30 years that is as successful as we want it to be, and they can look back on these days as I look back on prior days and say, they did their job. Those people 30 and 40 years ago gave us a county to be proud of, and our job as stewards is to hold that and pass that on to the next generation. And with that, I'm going to sign this into law.
Judge,
I'm going to ask, is this, okay. I'm going to ask Emily Saltzman, Operations Director, to join me up here as well. This document includes a committee report from the Board of Legislators that synopsizes the elements of what's in the contract. It's been voted out by the Committee on Budget and Appropriations and signed off on by the board in its entirety. It has an attachment of the document which the county and CSEA has signed already. It highlights all of the details, financial details that are involved in the contract. And then ultimately it shows that this Act, Act 79, 2023, was passed by the Board of Legislators on the first day of May, 16 votes for, no votes against, certified by Sunday Vanderberg. And this day is the 9th day?
Yes.
9th day of May? Just double checking. And with my signature, it is now an operative contract for the next 5 years. Hattie, congratulations. I'd like you to have a pen as a remembrance of this moment. I'd like you to give one to Larry, who's done such an outstanding job over this long period of time. Larry, thank you for your leadership in making all of this happen. And I also have a pen that I want to give to Emily on behalf of all of us who know that it's our operations team that day to day manages the workforce, and in the case of this, through all of our executives, does such a great job. Thank you, Emily. And before we close, may I ask the legislators in the room to please stand for recognition. Those members of the Board of Legislators, they too are a partner in all of this. Thank you, my friends. I'm George Latimer, wishing you a good day. Thank you.